Okay, today we're going to be talking about employee discipline. So, we believe this is the critical problem or I believe, sorry, this is the critical problem at the Doobie Cookies Union Incorporated, because there have been a few instances that we've seen at the company, or that I've seen, sorry, that I've seen at the company during my short time there. And it's been fairly apparent to me that there have been some issues with harassment, and our policies in place regarding that and how we should handle that with discipline. I am a little bit sick, so I apologize for that in advance. And I will try and do my best, but hopefully this works. Okay, so what is employee discipline? Let's just start with that. So when an employee does not deliver their work or doesn't behave as they are expected to behave in the workplace, the employer is responsible for clarifying expectations, providing incentives, and getting the employee to agree to meet those expectations. And then obviously the worker has to agree or meet those expectations, or they must terminate their employment with the company. So, for example, if I am at the company and I am late every day, my employer is required to explain to me that I have to be at work at 8 a.m., which is the time I start. And I need to be there until the end of the day at 5 p.m. and I have my hour-long lunch break, and they have to make that very clear to me. And if I don't meet that requirement, then we start the disciplinary process. And that's one of the things that we actually saw or that I actually saw at the Doohickeys company that was not in place, is there's not a great disciplinary process. And that can be really hard for employees and supervisors alike. So the steps of discipline: identify and categorize the issue. So with that being late thing, we'll go with that. So if I am not on time to work every day, that is that's the issue that we've identified. And then the informal positive contact. So that's when my boss would pull me aside and tell me things I'm doing well. It's kind of a thing that she does without really having a meeting in place. So just as she's walking by me, says, "Hey, I noticed you got here to work on time today, thank you," or "You got this report to me on time, thank you." And then informal plan performance improvement discussion. So that would be when she just said, "Hey, can we have a one-on-one together? Pull me into your office, tell me you're doing these things right, but I do need you to work at being on time more frequently." And then a formal reminder: if I still was not on time, she would pull me aside again and say, "Hey, you're still not on time. I'm going to need you to do that." Then she would do a second formal reminder. And then the last one would be a formal decision-making loop. So she would tell me, "Hey, you're still not on time. I have reminded you twice. We've had some discussions about this and nothing has happened. And I'm going to need you to make a decision about what you want to do here. Whether that be to terminate my employment or continue to work." So at Doohickeys, the reason I decided to highlight the discipline of the critical issues because of an incident that occurred on the fourth day of my time there, in which a supervisor approached me as I was touring the facility, and told me that they wanted to fire an employee, and they were doing this in quite a rage. And when I had asked for some clarification about the issue, they said that this was a state where they could just fire without anything in place. And one of the things that they pointed out was that the person is weird and they dress weird. Obviously, that's not appropriate. We can't fire somebody just because we don't like them. We fire them because they're not doing their job correctly. So the way that they dress at work does not fully affect the way that their work is being done, unless I'm coming to work not dressed, which in that case, obviously, you get fired. But we can't just fire somebody because we don't like them. There has to be something in place. Likewise, there was another incident on my 7th day there when a woman approached me who told me that some of her male coworkers have been making her feel very unsafe, I guess you could say, at work, making jokes about her breath. And obviously that's not appropriate either, because that is sexual harassment. And that is something that should be reported and should have disciplinary action with it. But there has been no disciplinary action because there was no evidence in place, because there was not a process in place. So this affects the company, the disciplinary action, having no disciplinary action affects the company, because without those policies in place, we're not, we have some dissatisfaction between employees and employers. And then there's harassment and other issues that are occurring without correction, which is obviously not appropriate. So what do we need to do? So there are 4 solutions I have come up with, and these are not in any order of whether or not they are most important and least important, just suggestions in general. So the first suggestion I would say is to create a clear policy around harassment and workplace expectations. And I would actually hang that in several different parts of the building. The pros of this are that every employee would know what is expected of them at work. And if that policy is violated, any inappropriate behaviors could be fit under different portions of a policy. So if someone came to HR and said, I feel unsafe because of X, Y, Z, I could put that under the umbrella of a certain part of the policy. Excuse me. Sorry. Okay. And then lastly, there's clearly outlined policies which would help employees know when they need to come and report issues to HR. There are times when something kind of feels like a gray area, and then they would at least know, well, this might fit under X umbrella of this policy, so why don't I go talk to my HR representative in general. The con of this are that veteran employees might not be susceptible to the training. It could take some time to fully implement it. We might have a lot of stuff come up right at the beginning when we implemented this whole thing. Just as people are learning about the policy, they might think, well, there was an incident 6 months ago, let's go talk to an HR representative, and we want to get it resolved, but that might be a little bit difficult. And then it could be difficult to rid the company of repeat offenders for the same reason. Because there wasn't a very great system before, there's not a ton of evidence in place now. So the woman who came and told me that people have been sexually harassing her, we don't really have evidence of that, even though it's been happening for about a year now, according to her. So it might take some time to implement everything. The solution too is to implement a discipline procedure. So we have that policy, let's now do a procedure. So the pros of this are that HR employees would have a clear line to follow when violations of policy do occur, and that employees would know what steps of the process of discipline they are in. So if I come to John, let's say, and I told him, hey, you're not on time to work, I'm going to need you to work on that. That's the first step, or whatever we've got in place. And I would recommend having probably a 4-step plan where we've got warning, formal reminder 2, and then you choose to leave or you choose to stay, basically. The big con with this that I see is that the pushback from managers or supervisors may occur if they want to get rid of employees quickly when they feel like the work being done isn't meeting the expectations they have in place. Not the company having in place, them having in place. So, for example, with the supervisor who came to me on my 4th day, them coming to me or complaining about their worker because they don't feel like that worker meets their expectation of what an employee should look like. To them, they just want to fire them right then, but we can't fire them without some sort of cause. So there has to be cause in place for this all to work. And that could be kind of frustrating for managers, I think. This third solution we have is to implement a bi-weekly one-on-one between employees and supervisors. I've done this at several jobs I've had in the past, and it's been really helpful. But we think the pros of this, I think the pros of this would be that employees would know what they're doing well and what needs to improvement. And they could also give employees the chance to offer feedback to supervisors as well. So supervisors come to their employees and say, hey, you're not doing this right. Here's what you are doing right. What can I do better? And then that employee can tell them, I don't think you're good at this, or you're micromanaging, or something like that. And that would be kind of helpful. The big con of this is that it cuts into company time, and that trainings will be necessary for supervisors to run these meetings properly. The trainings isn't a huge con. It's more of just time-consuming con. But supervisors need to be able to run these meetings effectively, where we learn, like, don't do compliment sandwiches because that's not helpful. And I need you to also learn how to accept feedback and that kind of thing. So, and then the fourth solution I have is to communicate and train employees on harassment policies quarterly. The reason we've done this, we decided to do this quarterly is because they talked about having to do hiring for this season, the Christmas season. And we're not sure how that's going. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. But I'm assuming that we also have to hire employees fairly frequently as people leave or retire or whatever it is. And quarterly is a good way to kind of catch everyone in that net, and also refresh older employees on these things. So the pros of this would be that it refreshes employees on policy and will hopefully decrease the amount of inappropriate behaviors at work. It would also allow employees to ask questions about company matters. And the cons would be that we would likely need to hire more HR personnel to put trainings in place, because HR should be the ones doing this training. And we would have to do training in shifts probably to keep company lines running as usual, or we'd have to have meetings outside of normal work hours. The way you could combat that is possibly by doing the training online, but I'm not entirely sure how that would look yet. Regardless though, oh, and these are some references, but regardless, I really, sorry, believe that if we were to do these things, employee satisfaction would go up just because there would be some clear policy regarding how we are disciplining others. And even if someone is not necessarily having to be disciplined, so if I'm an employee and I haven't done anything wrong, I still know that there's a policy in place and that there's a line in place, I guess, of action. So that if I report an inappropriate behavior, that behavior will be solved, and I can see the behavior being solved over time, and that would be really helpful. So that can improve the employee satisfaction and also the company's just general HR policies, I guess. So there we go.